Hey, how you guys doing? This video is going to be a little bit different to many other videos I've done on this channel before. I'm going to actually use the elders, where I got a lot of my ideas from, who actually helped molded my mind along the way. I'm going to let them speak to you themselves. And even though every one of the elders I'm going to feature in this particular video are already gone, their words are still true to this day. And we can still use the information to this day. But the key is not just to learn, but to implement what you have learned. Because if we don't implement anything they have taught us over the years, then all their works would have been in vain if we don't implement anything. You see, we have to get past just the learning phase and start implementing what we have learned. And I'm going to take a quick moment out to acknowledge our dear brother, Dr. Sabi, who passed away recently. I'm not going to say rest in peace, because if I'm alive, he's still alive. You see, it's energy. It's energy. You see, the teaching goes on. So a lot of his ideology is still alive in me. So I'm not going to say rest in peace, because that to me will be too final. So I'm just taking a little moment out to acknowledge him. And we got to do a better job, us on a whole, myself included, at actually acknowledging and appreciating our people while they're still here amongst us, instead of waiting until they die to finally acknowledge them. We got to do a better job at that. But with that being said, let's get this show started.
There are certain characteristics of the African American community which have been consistent throughout my adult years. Last year, I celebrated my 50th year as a teacher in the United States of America. These consistencies are: racism, or the belief in white supremacy, has been relentless and persistent throughout these 50 years. The absence of unity among African Americans in their pursuit of freedom and equality has been consistent. And the belief in education and God as the preferred means for that pursuit has steadily diminished. When I was a young girl in the 1930s and 1940s, African Americans, we were called Negroes or colored people then, had strong convictions about the pursuit of freedom and equality, which Reverend Flake has talked about this morning from his parents. My parents, born in the vicious years of Jim Crow, 1905 and 1907, when Negroes were lynched, and Mary McLeod Bethune once thought there was a chance for President Roosevelt to pass an anti-lynching law. But it never happened. But my parents fought against apartheid and Jim Crow because they believed in God and education. They believed in that old song, I shall not be moved. I shall not be moved. Just like a tree that's standing by the water, I shall not be moved. And they had faith in God and the future. As you know, faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. And this faith bolsters self-confidence and lifts self-esteem, but more than anything else, it nourishes the human spirit. And friends, it pays to be intelligent. Nobody wants to be dumb. But it is the human spirit that overcomes obstacles, like poverty, like racism, and sexism. There are 5 levers of power in a capitalist democracy: God, dollars, votes, knowledge, and guns. African Americans have all of these, And what keeps us from being successful is the lack of a unity among us to persist and stand like the tree by the water. I call this a degeneration of our spirit, and we must get it back. In 1997, Bernie Watson states in his book, Colored Black Negro Chasing the American Dream, says this: a different reality has set in at this writing. The African American community is now well represented in positions of power and responsibility. Look at us, look at us, look at us. Yet problems remain. Simultaneously, the country appears to be tired of confronting problems, and many political leaders seem eager to return to the good old days of intact families, quiet small towns, good education, jobs for everyone, and perfect harmony. These good old days never existed. That dimly remembered past is only a fantasy. The opposition, end of quote, the opposition to racism has caved in, as Bernie tells us in his book. Racism through Jim Crow relegated Negroes to poverty then as now, and preventing poverty will require redefinitions and a redistribution of opportunity for all people. These are the future challenges of public education. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we have a little bit of control over public education. We have absolutely no control over private education. None. The reason we do not understand this is because we do not understand capitalism. Look, we say and teach our children that we fight wars for democracy. Stop telling this lie to your children. We don't fight wars for democracy, we fight wars for capitalism. That is what is the essence of the American dream. The dollars have in God we trust on them, but it's not God we spend. It's not God we save. Your human spirit is not in your bank account. I'm not against dollars, don't get me wrong. But that's not where your heart is. And where your heart is where your treasure is. All right. You can have money and be poor. Oh yeah, I know people who got plenty of money. It's in a $40,000 Lexus in the garage. It's in $10,000 fur coats, $20,000 diamond rings. But money is important. And if you're going to make it in the United States, if we're going to make it as a group in the United States of America, we've got to better understand capitalism and what it means, because that is the essence. I want to thank Bernie Watson and Mona Risco for recommending me to participate in this very important conference, because the future of public education must be responsive to the needs of capitalism now that capitalism is the dominant economic system in the world. And you must understand that capitalism means that it's an economic system which guarantees that the goods and services, the ownership and distribution of goods and services is private. That's privately owned. It's privately owned. It's privately owned. It's privately owned. If I own the company, my son does not have to take a test to be vice president. The future of public education must be responsive to capitalism. And if we as a people are going to survive, we must be responsive to capitalism, or we will die in the prison system which has been constructed to contain African American men, especially now that they are armed. Look what happened to desegregation. We're 50 years into Brown, and we've resegregated. Why?
Because white people don't like black people and don't want to live with them and sure don't want to go to school with them.
And that's not good.
I mean, please, just deal with it. Deal with it. Decentralization didn't work. Why didn't decentralization work? It didn't work because there was not enough money to implement it, and taxpayers don't want to pay any more money to educate, and not, at least not black people in the center cities. So, you know, anywhere you go, but I don't even want you to deal with the, what do you call it, anecdotal knowledge. I want you to deal with the studies. How about the study that they did at Northwestern, where the students sent out applications for jobs using names, black names and white names? How about that one? So Lakeisha Washington and Jamal Jones didn't get the job, but Brendan Fraser and Emily Walsh did? I mean, now how much clearer can you be that whiteness is important?
But then what do you say to a young black person in terms of, yeah, education is worth it, you gotta get, you know, get out there and the kinds of things that your mother used to say to you about get as educated as you can and you can beat the system?
It's not going to work. That's why these kids aren't doing anything in school. Don't you understand? They understand you a big liar. And the other thing is, we're not doing anything about it. The preachers aren't doing anything about it. The teachers aren't doing anything about it. NAPSI's not doing anything about it. NAACP's not doing anything about it. The Urban League's not doing anything about it. Why? Because the topic is politically incorrect and must be sanitized.
Even at the expense of their own children's education.
It is done so. That's what's happening right now, right here, this minute. We don't have the courage that our people had during Jim Crow. Where is the Ida B. Wells? Where is the Mary McLeod Bethune? Where are they? We don't have the courage that our ancestors had.
Why not? It would seem that it doesn't take as much courage to step out there and fight the battles.
But it does.
It does?
Oh, yeah.
Even though on the surface, at least a lot of young people seem to feel, you know, things are, even young black people seem to feel, things are really so much better, and there's really not that much of a difference in terms of the way the races are being treated, and it really is a meritocracy, and you know, it'll all work out in the end.
That'll come out in the wash. My son has a PhD in animal science genetics. He can't get a job in any university because they choose Chinese. Now, why do they choose Chinese? Because they're cheaper.
The utter annihilation of the young black male population of the United States. Only the passive black bourgeoisie has been spared. The warriors are either dead, in prison, or on their ways to prison or death. Who will defend the race when the occupiers come for the rest of us? At this writing, having accomplished the annihilation of the potential leaders of a credible resistance force among the black population, the stage is set for a final assault on the rest of the population. Under current circumstances, those poor black mothers who have managed to hang on are now expected to fend for themselves in a state of nature. How will they survive the destruction? Because they cannot read and write and cannot therefore be employed, they will join their sons and brothers in the only economic option available to an illiterate inhabitant of the occupied territories of America. They will sell their bodies, or drugs, or weapons, or all three, depending upon the circumstances. To take out our women is the ultimate expression of genocide. As the foregoing Orwellian scenario unfolds, the castrated middle-class Negroes will continue to implore the black masses to vote. They will continue to hold their pep rallies at election time and their annual conventions at which they will continue to deplore the state of race relations in America. And they, the bourgeois Negroes, will vote. They will vote not for the crumbs of recent years. This time they will vote only for mercy from their white masters. Black America is at a pivotal moment in its history in the New World. A declining economy, low wage scales, Japanese and German capital chasing cheap American labor, third world health standards, fourth world public education standards, massive illiteracy, violence in the streets, drive-by killings, societal chaos, irrational and hysterical white responses to rational jury verdicts favoring black defendants, all signs point to a decaying nation which has lost its way. Within days, as we observed in the former Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, and Yugoslavia, fascism replaced communism. It can and will replace democracy with equal ease. Almost 100 years of segregation, lynchings, terror, and systematic oppression followed the end of the first Reconstruction. Political and economic gains of black Southerners were wiped out with the stroke of a pen. 1994 marked the end of the second Reconstruction. We are living in a new polity under a new set of rules. The old norms are inapplicable to the new order. As we learned from Germany in the 1930s, economic insecurity among a literate and cultivated population can produce in short order a nation of mad dog killers. In the United States, the population of which is neither literate nor cultivated, fascism is inevitable. As I pointed out in 1978 to a naive New York public whose legal wizards were urging everyone to seize race as a factor, as the positive aspect of Baki, that landmark decision marked the beginning of the end of the second Reconstruction in America. The congressional election of 1994 marked its official end. The majority electorate put an undeniable and unmistakable end to the pretense of rising racial expectations in a possibly just society in which equality of opportunity is an operational reality. The end of the second Reconstruction takes the form of preparation for race war by paramilitary militias and by racist law enforcement officials at every level of government in every state, legislative assaults on poor children, a vicious assault led by Bill Clinton on the Fourth Amendment's protections against unlawful searches and seizures, Regrettably, Louis Farrakhan, who has now been anointed by the mainstream media as the new Negro leader, is moving swiftly toward reconciliation and accommodation with the racist culture of this nation. His current campaign to register 8 million unregistered Negroes is but the most recent manifestation of the hang on and hope for a break syndrome. It assumes a viable future for a despised race in a racist culture and deflect the attention of the slaves with mass meetings, mass marches, and menacing rhetoric, while the objective circumstances of their lives deteriorate to the point of hopelessness. Unless the best African minds achieve a collective and racially responsible consensus on a concrete solution to the African dilemma on this planet and begin to act in a rational manner to achieve that solution, Farrakhan, with all his charisma and eloquence, amounts to little more than the latest in a long line of purveyors of diversion and hope in a hopeless situation. Almost 400 years of continuous warfare against our race in America attest to the futility and absurdity of Jesse Jackson's flippant plea to keep hope alive, as we observe daily an escalation of overt oppression and hatred. No race in the history of mankind, except perhaps the Jews who perished in Hitler's crematoria, has clung so desperately to hope as a possible antidote to systematic oppression, as have the descendants of the African slaves who were brought to these alien shores in chains. Leaders do not beg for crumbs from an oppressor. Leaders do not seek dialogue with an oppressor. Leaders do not suffer from historical amnesia. Leaders do not forgive 400 years of continuous oppression and repression of their people. Leaders do not apologize for spilling their blood on the carpets of an oppressor. Leaders make rational demands based on principles of justice, logic, and equity. In the absence of compliance with their demands, leaders propose and act upon alternative courses of conduct. Alternative courses of conduct take many forms, the last and most drastic of which is armed conflict. It is because the masses understand almost instinctively the probability and imminence of armed conflict that they look to the gangsters as their last hope for rational leadership on this side of the Atlantic. In an all-out race war in this country, the blacks will obviously lose. Our best fighters have already been removed from the field of battle. Our would-be warriors are hardly more than brainwashed zombies who can be counted on to do their duty. Because I have understood the containment policies of this nation in its subjugation of a despised minority, and the current abandonment of containment in favor of systematic annihilation, I do not salute the flag. I do not stand when the Star-Spangled Banner is played at public events. And I am certainly too mature to engage in delusional activities exemplified in the singing of "We Shall Overcome." It is precisely because of my certainty that we as a despised minority in a racist land shall not overcome, that I have taken the time to come here tonight and suggest a rational alternative to armed conflict and military defeat as the inevitable denouement of our unfortunate stopover in this decaying land. The last time I raised the question of an African future for our people on the continent of Africa, I was widely accused by some of my nationalist friends of having abandoned the struggle. That is perhaps the case. Before I am condemned again, please permit me, if you will, to examine the concept of black struggle in an American context. For centuries, the slaves and descendants of slaves in North America have been engaged in constant struggle, most often in response to the oppressive acts of a racist nation. With the exception of a few vaguely articulated cliches and slogans, the goals of our struggle in America are essentially undefined. Appeals for complete equality and the chanting of inanities such as "we want it all" and "we want it now" have added nothing to a rational discussion of goals. Let us not delude ourselves. The struggle for racial justice in America has been and continues to be a defensive struggle designed to protect and defend illusory gains. We struggle to hold on to mayoralties of the major cities as state and federal budget cuts and state-administered block grants assure their deaths. The struggle against the cuts takes the form of protest rallies which produce no concrete results. The criminal justice system is designed expressly to annihilate the young black male. All the statistical evidence and social indices support an inevitable conclusion. The struggle is being waged and fought on a daily basis, and victory, however defined, is not in sight. Nevertheless, the struggle continues. In the absence of clearly defined goals, if you please, the struggle is a farce. And those of us who engage therein are engaged in a farce. Unwittingly, to be sure, but a farce nonetheless. We have defined struggle as an end in itself, and one's self-worth is defined in terms of one's commitment to or contribution to the struggle. We make martyrs of our leaders who die in the struggle, and this is as it should be. But it misses the point. Struggle is not and never can be, except for the mentally challenged, an end in itself. It is rather a means to an end. Palestinians struggle for a state. Kurds struggle for autonomy. Black South Africans struggled for political control of their country. For what tangible goals do slave descendants struggle in North America? A piece of the pie? That, if I may, is an individual goal. A goal already achieved by a handful of us. But what are our racial goals in a racist land? To posit racial equality as a rational goal in a society that is fundamentally racist is to come dangerously close to charlatanism. It is to posit a goal that cannot be. It points us down a road that will be marked by nothing but struggle. There is, however, a different way of looking at the world and the place of the African in the world. The current wave of oppression and the reversion to a Darwinian theory of society, the survival of the fittest, will surely end with the final disillusionment of our people. At this point, responsible adults must have something more to offer than keep on pushing and we shall overcome. We are at the final crisis, and we must make our people understand that the sun does not rise and set solely within the continental limits of the United States of America. They must at last begin to understand that our roots are not here, that we have a homeland, that our homeland is the richest and most thinly populated major land mass on the face of the globe, and that our destiny as Africans in America is to participate in the restoration of that unfortunate continent to its former status as a leader in arts, culture, and science.
Officially, I'll title my talk today Beyond White Racism, Beyond Civil Rights, Human Rights, and into African Revolution. I'm going to center on the concept of revolution today. And I will tell you why, because I'm sure some of you will think that that's somewhat passé to be talking about revolution. That was something people talked about in the 60s and the 70s, and why talk about it now? But I think, and I hope that as a result of what I have to say here today, you might change your opinion about that particular topic. I'd like to, of course, commend you for your celebration of African history, of African American history. And of course, we recognize the importance of studying such history. However, I think we still underestimate the value of the study of African history. I think we celebrate it without analyzing it. We search it and look for heroes without understanding that one of its major purposes is to teach us lessons on how to cope with the present and with the future. Not only are those people who do not know their history doomed to repeat it, but those who often misread it are often doomed to repeat it as well. And those who misread and perhaps fail to read it at all may not have a chance to repeat it at all. And I think we have reached this point where our failure to understand history is going to put us in a position where we won't have a chance to learn it again. The survival of our people is at the crossroads today. And our study of history then should be about more than celebrating our heroes, about more than celebrating the struggles, than just keeping eyes on the prize. And those are valuable things, obviously. But we must look at history in terms of coming to understand our current and our future obligations and what must be accomplished by those things. If we're not careful, we will be beguiled by our study of history. Many of us who have not studied, for instance, Reconstruction history, the history of the United States, particularly of African Americans during the 1860s and 70s, may think that we are entering a new era in American history. We may think that the things that we're witnessing today, the elections of blacks to political office and their appointment to various positions, their activities in various corporations, and so forth, is something new in American history. And yet, a study of Reconstruction history will quickly convince us that we are currently undergoing deja vu. Many of us see history as a continuing progress upward and onward. We have bought the American concept of progress, the idea that things must, over time, necessarily get better. There is no law in the universe that tells you that your future survival is assured, that you will continue to exist now and into the future. There have been races and ethnic groups who have been virtually wiped out on this planet. And there's no guarantee that your own group will not be wiped out as well. The idea then that you must necessarily arrive at a point greater than those of your ancestors could possibly be an illusion. The idea that somehow through some great automation you are going to be in a better condition than your people is an illusion often of not studying history and recognizing that progressions and regressions occur in history, that integrations and disintegrations occur in history. History is not a fairy tale where certain things are accomplished and then people live happily ever after. And many of us think then that the accomplishments that we've made up to this point means that we are only going to expand them in the future. I think you had better think about that again. And I'll point out today why we must not be so optimistic as to be foolish. In fact, let us go back for a moment to an article written in the Ebony magazine, October 1981, wherein Lerone Bennett, who wrote the book Black Power USA, I think wrote his conclusion to the book. When I read that book, Black Power USA, and I guess it was published back in, the 60s maybe, or 70s, at least early 70s. And I finished reading it, I said, the last chapter of this book is missing. You know, and it went on to laud black power during the Reconstruction era and so forth. And yet somehow the logical conclusions were not drawn at the end of that book. The lessons that that book implied were not expressed openly and completely. And consequently then, I think some people would have been left with the wrong impression. But lo and behold, he did write the final chapter, but not in the book itself, but in the magazine. The second Reconstruction is history repeating itself. This is October 1981. And he titled it, as you can see here, The Second Time Around. Will history repeat itself and rob blacks of the gains of the 1960s? So he's dealing with the issue again here. We gained it once and we lost it. Is there any law in the universe that says we will not lose it again? And I like the introduction here. He starts out by saying, over. It was at last, at long last, over and done with. How could anyone doubt it? How could anyone fail to see that the race problem had been solved forever? One man who had no doubt said, all distinctions founded upon race or color have been forever abolished in the United States. Another who saw things this way said the category of race had been abolished by law and that there were no more colored people in this country. Thus spoke the dreamers and the prophets and victims in the first Reconstruction of the 1860s and the 1870s. I don't think I have to elaborate on this kind of attitude. We run into too many youngsters today who say, oh, that was in slavery time. Oh, those were the things that you talked about in the 60s. That's the 60s and the 70s. We're in a new day now. We're not in a new day, ladies and gentlemen. The same words that we were saying today, the same words that we're saying today, the same words that people said over 100 years ago. Why are we in a new day when we're saying the same thing that someone said 100 years ago? He goes on to say, and it is worth emphasizing here at the very beginning that these flights into fantasy were based on the same hard facts that gripped the imagination of blacks in the second Reconstruction of the 1960s and 70s. There was, for example, a black man in the U.S. Senate in the 1870s. And there was a black governor in Louisiana. In the 1860s and the 1870s, as in the 1960s and 1970s, there were black sheriffs and mayors in the South. And there was open speculation about a black vice presidential candidate. So the Jesse run is not new in black American history, ladies and gentlemen. There was moreover a network of civil rights laws that seemed to settle the issue beyond all possibility of dispute or recall. Same kind of situation we talked about here today when you try to tell our people that laws don't protect anyone. And there are so many of us who believe that fair housing laws and anti-discrimination laws and civil rights laws and voting laws and so forth guarantee our freedom. What an illusion. What a flight into fantasy. Laws are no stronger than their enforcers. And the same people who pass those laws are the same people who are responsible for enforcing the law. And if the people then who enforce the law no longer decide to do so, the laws then are of no value and have no power. Ultimately then, fairness rests, and the fairness of treatment rests, not in laws, but in the activities of people, and in the attitude and consciousness of people. And if people who are responsible for enforcing those laws change their attitudes, then the treatment of those people whose freedom is protected by those so-called laws is now changed as well. You cannot put your faith in a white man's law and in laws enforced by whites. I have warned people many times that if it comes one day where the society has to make a choice between feeding white children and feeding black children, no amounts of civil rights laws or any other laws on the books will prevent those people from feeding their children first. It is a silly faith that we have then in laws. And for people in the 1970s and 80s and 90s to still rest their freedom on the basis of laws, when the very history itself shows us that this cannot be done, we must question their sanity and what they have learned from the study of that history.
I don't think we have learned that much from history at all, to tell you the truth. Now, some of us have learned, but on a collectively, worldwide, I don't think we have learned that much from history. In fact, we don't even study history. If you just look right here on YouTube, on the internet, we see what's popular amongst our people. So anything that you have to learn and actually spend some time actually using your brain, we don't want to do it. So it's going to happen, as you say, we're not going to even be in a position to actually repeat history. You see, and that's the dangerous thing. But we have to get over this notion that we're going to save every African person on the planet. That's not going to happen. History has shown that it won't happen, because all too often we spend a lot of time focusing only on those outside the camp, such as the Europeans, the Asians, the Arabs, and so forth. But we tend to look very seldomly inside the camp. There are a lot of us inside the camp who will fight to keep the status quo the way it is, and we don't realize that. You see, when you study history, really analyze history, some of our biggest betrayers look just like us. The people who killed Brother Maurice Bishop in Grenada look just like us. The people who actually overthrew Kwame Nkrumah look just like us. The people who set up Brother Malcolm and killed Brother Malcolm look just like us. The people who actually set up Fred Hampton look just like us. The people who actually sold out Brother Marcus Garvey look just like us. The people who actually went out there and actually betrayed Brother Patrice Lumumba look just like us. You know, like I said, people who actually killed Thomas Sankara, his best friend, look just like us. We got to stop playing games as if we have this romantic notion. We just want to look at only one group. We got to look at it on a holistic level. Look at it for what it is. Stop playing games with it. And this notion that you're going to save every African person because they look like me, get off of that notion. As I already told you, there are many people that look just like us that will physically hurt you and in some cases kill you to keep things the way they are. And I'm talking about globally now. Globally. That will kill you to keep the status quo the way it is. Okay? Well, with that being said, I'm going to wrap this video up, but not without some great words from a great man in my book, the elder Dr. Sebi. Yes, he might have had faults, but every human on this planet has faults. Okay, so I'm not looking for a perfect person. The man had a lot of great wisdom. But in this particular clip, I want you to really analyze carefully what he's saying, because you can tell that Brother Sebi was aggravated and angry. I got the link to the description box where I got this video clip from this brother's channel, so you can check him out. But with that being said, thanks for watching, you guys. Take it easy. Thanks for your feedback as always. And just listen, man, and do the best you can, man. Just focus and be vigilant. Take it easy. I'm out.
Man. That's the something. Yeah.
I was hitting you up.
Shut up.
You know it's good.
Man, I didn't know my own son.
Yeah, this is a gentleman to help me. Yeah. Hey,
I didn't know my own son. Wow. I went on this fast 60 days ago, 62 days today I stopped eating. And I needed it. I'd be 81 in 3 days. I thought of him. And now that I come to New York, and I have to be in the state of revulsion, only because I did this woman a favor 2 months ago, and she was healed and she didn't have to pay me any money, and she come and sign a contract behind my back, and that contract become binding, and I'm supposed to submit. But you know something? My DNA doesn't dictate that kind of shit. You understand? She leave or I leave. Then you may think that I'm forsaking my clients, but I've got my own ethics to live up to. I would not undermine me. I walk home. This young man knows his daddy. Understand? He grew up with me. Although my son, but I have much respect for him. Much respect, much love. And for his mother too. And his sisters. Because they didn't do to me what has been happening to me in the last years. You know, we are really, really, really sick. We are really sick. The white man has done a damn good job on us. You understand? We are the sickest on the planet, and we cannot find a way to come together to heal that. That's what's wrong with us. Are we that sick? That today a woman is going to usurp on me, and that is honored? I know it would be honored. You know why? Because money is involved. That's why. No, Savvy would never change. I wish I could.